Hello, art history students. So today we are doing Unit 1, Lecture 1. So this is the very first lecture of the semester. I just want to give you guys kind of a quick information on this first unit. So it is not chronological. That will begin a little bit later in the semester. We'll start at prehistoric and we'll move to contemporary times. This unit is about how you look at art and the terminology, the information that goes along with looking at art. So rather than give you chronological examples, I'm giving you kind of the best examples so that way you're familiarizing yourself with the language. So with that being said, we have 5 main vocabulary terms that we're kind of talking about today, 5 kind of new terms. We'll talk about that towards the end, so let's just jump right in. Okay, so what is art and why should you study it? So art is a visual language. It's going to communicate a ton of information. We've all heard that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? That's quite literally what we're doing here. And this is probably what's most applicable to you guys. So the vocabulary of art translates and overlaps with all disciplines in the humanities and sciences. So whether you are here studying to be a nurse, studying to be a lawyer, studying, in the judicial, whatever you are doing here, whatever you are studying, art is going to overlap that. Because what art is about is it's this kind of connection between what we see and know and like the vocabulary that goes along with it. So no matter what you're doing, this is going to help give you a wider vocabulary to express the ideas that you see. Right? So that's going to overlap with everything. It's a good vocabulary to have. So let's jump right in. All right, so I have 3 artworks here. These are kind of the first 3 that we're seeing for the semester. And they're all depicting the same thing, but in very different ways. Usually, if we're in the classroom setting, I'm kind of like, what do you guys think it is? But we're just going to jump right past that. They're all depicting water. Right? So all 3 of these are depictions of water, and they're depictions of water in 3 different categories. Those categories deal with the basic styles of art. So the first 3 we've just seen: representational, stylized, and abstract. I'm going to talk more about those in the coming slides. And then the other basic style of art is non-objective. This is kind of the number 4 at the bottom. This one is separate from the other 3. It could be kind of listed first, but these representational, stylized, and abstract, they need to be in that order to be understood properly. So that'll make more sense as we go along. Okay, Frederick Edwin Church's Niagara. This is a representational depiction of Niagara Falls. So the artist is trying to capture visually, representatively, right, the water as it cascades over, kind of that power, the mist, how it affects light, right? You can even see, right, just up here, it's kind of usually not depicted. There's almost like this, you can see this rainbow happening, right? So the artist is spending a lot of time trying to depict what we would see if we were there, representational. Next is stylized. So this is moving away. This is very different from Frederick Edwin Church's. So if you look kind of down here, the depiction of water is actually under the surface of the water. So if we were to look at the surface of the water, it would be smooth and flat like a lake. But this is a depiction of the Nile, right? There's this water that's moving underneath. So there's actually this current pushing this boat along. And we need this stylized image in order to fully understand that. Because if they were to just depict the water on the surface, we might not get the understanding that that boat is moving. We might think it's just paused, right, in this still lake, right? So we've all, whether you boat or not, you all can kind of imagine there's water that's not standing, like on a lake, that's not moving, and then water in a river that's got current. All right, next is Louise Nevelson's White Vertical Water. We're going to pause and kind of talk about this for just a moment. So first things first, on all artworks that I show you guys, there's going to be this little kind of brick of information, and I want to take this moment to break that down since this is the first lecture. So the first thing you're going to see in this brick is the name of the artist, so Louise Nevelson here. Second is going to be the title. So it's White Vertical Water, and that title is almost always going to be italicized. Sometimes in the art world, we don't have a artist, like we don't have an artist name, but we'll have a culture that created the artwork. Then there's going to be a date. Sometimes that's a date range. This is 1972. This is a pretty early or like more contemporary artwork. What it's made of. In this case, it's made of painted wood. Then we've got the dimensions of it, right, which we're going to talk about in a second. And then the very last thing is where the artwork exists in the world now. So this artwork is in the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, right? But that doesn't mean that's where it was made, right? Oftentimes artworks can be made in one place. Think about ancient Egyptian artworks that are in our museums here in the United States. So that's the last piece of information, is where the artwork exists now. Sometimes it'll say private collection. It just means it's at somebody's house. Okay, what's important for us right now is this 18 by 9 feet. So this artwork is 18 feet tall, which is almost as tall as a 2-story building. So let's kind of think about, if we were to look at the artwork from the side, it kind of has this cascading, it's not that skinny, but that's okay. It has this kind of cascading effect. So if you're a person standing down here, right, and you're looking up at this artwork that's 2 stories tall, it kind of like would almost feel or appear like it's going to cascade down on you, right? Very much like Frederick Edwin Church's Niagara. The artist is trying to capture that power of water as the water moves, right? As it cascades over this waterfall, right? Very different way of doing that. So that has to do with the top 3: representational, stylized, and abstract. All right, so these are kind of like they exist on a spectrum. Let's go to the next slide. Oops, I thought that was a different slide there. Okay, so representational is art that depicts what it is, right? This is it is what it is of the art world. This is Marcus Aurelius on it's an equestrian statue. It's a man on a horse. Bam. Representational, girl with a pearl earring, very famous artwork we will talk about later in the semester. Right? This kind of snapshot of reality. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind as we look through most of this class, especially once we start the chronological thing, is the camera is a very new invention. People did not get the ability to look back at a moment, right? Everything was kind of from memory. So something like this is capturing this moment. We take this very much for granted. All right, so stylized is this movement away from representational. So this is representational, right? And we're kind of migrating towards stylized. You can think about this as a spectrum, and then whatever, representational is on this side, and then we're kind of migrating towards abstract. So stylized can come in so many different forms because it's that basically everything in the middle. So this is Jeff Koons' Rabbit. This is a much more contemporary example from 1986. This looks, when you first see it, it looks very much so like one of those inflatable balloons that's very soft, right? So you could squeeze it and it would make this like vut, vut, vut sound, right? But then when you look at what it's made of, it's made of stainless steel. So it's actually very, very hard metal, right? So there's this kind of play. It looks like one thing, but it's made of something else, right? And it's also very much larger than what we would imagine a little inflatable rabbit balloon would be. So this is a version of stylized, kind of representationalist version of stylized, right? This is another famous example. This is the Great Wave off the shore of Kanagawa, right? So if you look at this wave here, it has this foam at the end, and then there are 3 boats with people in them. So at the end of those waves are like these menacing claws that are kind of coming down. And it's stylized in order to show the kind of the power and the fear, and this sort of like, this wave could be very, very, very dangerous, especially to the fishermen or people in the boats, right? So it's stylized in order to show that power that it has. It's not a very representational image. That's not what wave foam looks like, right? It's intentionally stylized. Okay, as we're I'm showing you these examples of stylized, we're kind of getting a little bit farther towards abstract, and that's intentional. So this is another Japanese example. This is a Japanese tea bowl, and I want you guys to focus in kind of on this rim section. So most of the cups that we encounter have this smooth rim, they're industrially manufactured. So this tea bowl has this very undulated rim. And what the idea behind it is that when you look at it, you hold it and look at it, there's kind of like this little tiny landscape where this is, whoops, the horizon in front of you, and then there's this mountainous horizon, and then the sky up here, right? So it's kind of like this foreground, middle ground, background, and you get this depiction of a landscape just from the top of this cup, right? So much more towards abstraction with this landscape that you see on top of this cup, but still a stylized image. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of like stylized is this huge range, and stylized often exaggerates in order to draw your attention to something, right? Think that wave off the shore of Kanagawa. So abstract departs from recognizable images. It's all the way on the other end of the spectrum. Things are distorted and almost unrecognizable, right? So we talked about Louise Nevelson's White Vertical Water. That's the main example that we have. Another example here is Georgia O'Keeffe. This one is music, so she titled it so we knew what her source material was. So she's thinking about music in pinks and blues, maybe tones of a song. We don't know what the song is specifically. I personally think it looks like a flower, like if you were a bumblebee going down inside of a flower to collect pollen, this might be what the environment looks like down inside of there. So it's very much so departed from, if we didn't know the title, we might have a hard time understanding what the source material is. And I keep using this word source material intentionally because all three of these that we see above have source material, right? Whether it's representationally depicted or very, very abstractly depicted, they all have a source material. Non-objective does not depict a recognizable source material. So non-objective art is dealing with oftentimes just the principles and elements of design. We haven't talked about that, but that's going to be what we're going to talk about next in this class. So this artwork with this kind of like line that goes around that's reflective, it's not depicting the pattern of a butterfly or this or that or the other. It's literally just about this line and how that line exists in the world. Right? So let's give another example. I think non-objective is sometimes a little bit hard for students to wrap their heads around. So this is Mark Rothko's work. This one is, he just kind of numbers all of his artwork and his series rather than giving them titles. Part of the reason for that is there's no source material. It's not hamburger, zoom in, right? That's not what's happening here. I want to put context of time in place. This was painted in 1950. So the context of that time in America here is after World War II. So what Mark Rothko and other artists of the time were trying to depict was this universal experience, right? So the World War II was this time when people were really divided up by who they are and what they believe and their religions and that kind of thing, and then put into these separate camps, quite literally, right? So that was, artists wanted to no longer do that. Everyone should have this universal experience. That was the goal, right? Which is a very ambitious and great goal, right? So the idea is that I and you, no matter where you are in the world, are looking at this artwork and seeing the same thing. We're all seeing this orange, red, kind of a light yellowy orange, and then almost a white yellowy top right there, right? We're all seeing the same thing. We're all having the same experience. But these artists kind of miss the mark a little bit, and here's why. So let's imagine that growing up, my grandma's kitchen was this color. And her house always smelled like cranberries, and she baked muffins, and I loved her so much, right? I'm going to look at this and have this association with that because there's the same color as her kitchen. Now, Let's say you grew up and this was the color of your childhood bedroom, and you had to share your bedroom with your sister, and she was mean and she would pull your hair or whatever. You know what I mean? And so you're going to have a negative association with that color. And thus you're going to have a negative association with the painting, right? Whereas mine's going to be positive. So in trying to create this universal experience, what these artists really exposed was the fact that everyone carries their own baggage with them, whether that baggage is cultural or whether that baggage is personal to your life. We all are, when you look at a work of art, you are bringing you to the table. You can try, we can all try to say, okay, I'm gonna like set all of these ideas behind myself when I look at this artwork, but it's really difficult to separate who you are, right, as you look at artwork. Why am I bringing this up on the very first lecture? Because sometimes as you look at art, I want you to bring that to the table, and sometimes I want you to try or attempt to leave it behind, right? And I want you to do that actively. I want you to make that conscious decision of, okay, I don't like this, but I want to understand it more, right? Like that's the inquisitive nature I want you to have moving forward. All right, let's keep on going. Okay, so those are our three main artworks, right? Our representational one, our stylized one, and then our abstract one, right? I'm not going to spell it all out. Okay, so you're probably going to want to know those terms, right? The four main styles of art: representational, stylized, abstract, and then non-objective. Non-objective is that one that doesn't have source material. Okay, this brings us to our last kind of terminology that I'm bringing to the table for this lecture. So this is aesthetics. So aesthetics is a branch of philosophy that deals with basically why people like what they like, but dealing with the five senses. So aesthetics is not just what you like visually or what you like. Aesthetics gets used, this term gets used a lot when it comes to interior decorating. If you've ever watched like a whole makeover show, they'll talk about the country kitchen aesthetic, right? But aesthetics is so much more broader than that. It's why we like what we like as far as textures and smells and tastes, right? Some people love spicy, some people don't. That brings us to this week's discussion. It's kind of bouncing off last discussion where you introduced yourself. This is still a little bit more of kind of, I want to know who you are. So you're going to give 100 words. You're going to describe a positive or negative aesthetic that you have on one or more of the following. So this is important. You cannot just list. You cannot be like, I like the sight of the rain and the smell of chicken and the taste or touch of wool, whatever. You're not listing them like that. What's important for this is why. Why you like what you like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of an interesting example from myself. I love the smell of moss, right? Like that wet decomposing earth smell that's like underneath a moss. If you're out walking in the woods and you see a big patch of it, I also like the touch of moss, right? That like texture that's happening there. But that's only in that context. Because if you take that wet earth smell and you put it, say, in your basement, then it's a negative smell, right? So context is important for that. But that's an aesthetic that I like. I like that smell. So that's what I want you guys to kind of talk about. What is interesting? What is positive or negative? Don't just give me a list, right? You need to write 100 words. And then for full credit, you also need to comment on at least 2 of your fellow classmates' posts. These, if you guys write these with a little bit of intention, they are interesting to read because some people will talk about how they really like certain touches or textures, and you may have never thought about, the sound that comes from certain textures, right? When you're touching certain things, maybe there's an association with that. So have fun with this discussion post. Those are our 5 basic key terms, right? The 5 vocabulary points. I will see you guys in the next lecture.